I don't remember who killed me or how they did it, but I do remember the pain, even after so many years. It radiated from my gut, then my lungs, and finally my neck. Though it could only have lasted for a few minutes, it felt like days. When it finally stopped, I found myself in nothingness. At the time, I'd lost my concept of self. All I could feel was a sensation of floating upwards towards something that tugged gently on my soul. In that nothingness, I didn't know who I was. I couldn't form a thought. I just felt light. A warmth settled over me as I drew closer to my unknown destination. The higher I floated, the hotter it burned, but it never hurt. I was so close. My soul sang in joy, and euphoria that was stronger than a hit of opium consumed me. But as soon as it was within arm's reach, my ascent halted. Some force tangled around me, constricting my soul until it threatened to crack. Once it had a hold of me, it dragged me away from paradise. Faster than I rose, I plunged into an abyss. The warmth dissipated, and a chill embraced me. I fell down, down, and further down, until I weighed more than the earth and was colder than the Arctic. It was a different kind of agony than the one I remembered, but it was much more devastating. If I could scream, I would have. If I could thrash, my limbs would have protested until they gave out. But I was more helpless than a newborn baby. Once the weight had built up to that of a collapsing star, and the cold had reached absolute zero, sensations I'd forgotten flooded my being. Lights, colors, sounds, completely overwhelming me. I couldn't form a thought. Instead, panic and desperation filled my consciousness with blaring sirens. Gradually, the shapes came together, and the chaos in my head quieted. With my newfound sight, I looked down at my arms and legs. They were familiar, but they didn't strike me as my own. I was in an empty room, surrounded by furniture covered in sheets and dust. Cobwebs filled my head. In that room, for hours, I knelt on the floor and dug around for anything. Who was I? No name felt like my own. Where was I? As familiar as that place felt, I had nothing that attached me to it. When I went to stand, I floated weightless to my feet. My loose-fitting white nightgown fluttered as I drifted. I'd missed it before, but it was heavily stained, with blooms of red from around my chest and stomach. I couldn't feel a thing either, just a slight chill that constantly nagged at me. I tried to speak, but my words came out in a raspy, gurgling whisper. I paced the room, my feet hardly touching the floor until I found a covered mirror. When I wanted to remove the sheet, it slid off on its own, somehow responding to my desires. A strange, pale woman met me in my reflection. She was skinny, with messy black hair and colorless eyes. What stood out most were the vicious wounds on her body. Multiple holes littered her chest and stomach, and blood caked around her long gash through her throat. Her reflection was somewhat translucent. I reached forward to touch her, and frost gathered on the glass as my hand met hers. "You," she spoke with me, but no sounds left her mouth. Memories threatened to surface, vague impressions of screams and fear, but as close as they bubbled to the surface, they were lost. I couldn't look at her anymore. The thoughts she dredged up flooded me with anxiety. The mirror, responding to my distress, shattered, launching hundreds of shards in all directions, lodging into walls and dicing through sheets. I left the room and drifted down the hall toward the stairs. It was a beautiful house, but it looked profoundly lifeless. "Hello," I called out, finally regaining some of my voice. Nothing responded. The next bedroom I found was the master bedroom. When I stepped inside, fragments of memories bombarded me. Laughter, tears, and shrieks assailed me. I saw a man I couldn't identify and a boy whose face filled my heart with immense sadness. The door slammed behind me as I fled the scene. Exploring the new house didn't offer many new clues as to where or who I was. Sometimes, I would walk under an archway or into a room, and for a brief moment, some flash of familiarity would hit me. It left as quickly as it came. That vast, sprawling mansion with its many empty halls and desolate rooms caused aches and heaviness I couldn't explain. I put a hand against the front door. My body could easily pass through every other object in the house, but the front door was solid. I grabbed the dull copper handle, and a shock ran through my arm and down my spine. My shriek rattled the walls, and the nearest picture frames burst into splinters. I doubled over, heaving for air I didn't need. After I had my bearings, I rushed away. Once I had thoroughly explored, I went back to the room I first found myself in. The room had a drawer, as though it anchored my soul to the spot. When I stepped through the door, exhaustion hit me. Though I had just woke for the first time I could remember, I needed more rest. With pieces of the past adrift in my head, my body faded. My arms gradually became translucent, and my thoughts slowed until I fell into hibernation. I can't say how much time passed, but my slumber was numb, like I'd fallen asleep in the snow and gradually succumbed to the cold. Something approaching me in the house gently roused me. Their bodies' warmth passed through the walls and boundaries to shine on me. Like a moth to a flame, I drifted to my feet toward the front door's handle rattling. "Is this the right key?" a man's voice asked from the other side of the door. The lock clicked and the handle shook. "I'm sure it is. You just have to force it a little," a woman responded. The man grunted in response and bashed his shoulder against the door while turning the key, throwing it open and letting daylight in for the first time in what I had to think were many years. The sunlight made my skin crawl, but the life oozing from the couple nearly made me drool. I needed to be near it, to soak it in. Maybe that would be enough to warm me up the slightest bit. Behind the couple, a boy stepped in, clinging to his mother's dress and sweeping the grand entrance. Emotions stirred within me, and the boy practically glowed. I nearly flew down the stairs to scoop him into my arms, but stopped myself. I was too eager. The carpet under my feet was stiff as the little moisture that clung to it had turned into ice crystals. "Gosh, it's freezing in here. What's going on?" The man stepped into the home and rubbed the goosebumps on his arms. Little blue eyes fixated on me. "Hey, Mom, what's that?" The boy pointed in my direction. I was flustered enough to run off, but bubbly that someone had recognized me. I waved back at him and tried to smile, but I may have forgotten how. His mother followed his gesture, squinting at me and rubbing her eyes. "Huh. Hey, Rob, do you see that shimmer up there?" She tugged on the man's sleeve. I thought I'd like the attention. Companionship should have done something to fill the emptiness, but I couldn't take their stares, and instead rushed off before he could get to look at me. I returned to the only place I knew, the first place I came to in that new life. For the next few days, luggage and furniture scraped the old wood floor, and people chattered past the door. Vibrant life filled the home. Somehow, it was as intoxicating as it was repelling. Being near it was like staring straight at the sun until my eyes burned. Memories like those remained, facts and vague experiences. But no matter how much time passed, my sense of self had yet to return. On their last unpacking day, the man came to my room's door and jiggled the handle. "Damn!" he shouted the instant the handle started to turn, jerking his hand back to his chest. "What in God's name?" he muttered before walking off. He returned later to try again, pounding at the door and fiddling with the hinges, but it wouldn't budge. Finally, he gave up and left me alone. The family settled into the home, and I worked up the nerve to leave my room. While they gathered around the table, sharing meals and talking, I would watch from around corners like I was sitting by a hearth. I imagined myself joining them. I wanted to scoop the boy in my lap and sing to him. I wanted to share stories with the couple, to laugh and smile. In the nights, when their warmth faded while they slept, I found myself weeping, clutching my heart that couldn't beat, crying with no tears. My hushed wails would reverberate down the empty halls until dawn broke. The chill in my body grew colder by the day, until just basking in the family's glow from a distance was no longer enough. For months, I watched the boy and learned about his likes and dislikes, his patterns and mannerisms. He was mischievous, sometimes whiting out clues on his father's crossword to make it unsolvable, or hiding in the house's nooks and crannies to jump out at his mother when she least expected it. He had a glint in his eye when he listened to his favourite music from the big, clunky machine they had in the living room, or when his mother made him pot pie. All of it tugged at memories that refused to surface. Sometimes, his face would shift into another child's, one more familiar, but never for long. No matter how hard it was, I had to see him. Even if my hands passed through him, I had to touch him. I worked up the nerve to show myself for the first time. While his mother tucked him in, I stepped through the door and into the hall. In the middle of his story time, the boy noticed my form. At first, he stared into the hall quizzically. I willed my body to turn more opaque, and we locked eyes for the first time. I put on the softest smile I could and gave a small wave. His eyes went wide, and he stiffened under the covers, gripping the edges with white knuckles. "What's wrong, Thomas?" His mother stopped her reading when she noticed his shock. Thomas stammered and raised a trembling finger in my direction. My arms fell to my sides. It wasn't how I imagined it would be. As his mother turned to me, I stepped through the wall to my left, vanishing from their sight. For hours, I lay on the floor and sobbed. Slick, thin sheets of ice formed on the walls as I cried, but I wouldn't give up.
"Hey, Deborah, did you hear something last night?"
The man asked the following day while standing outside of my door.
"I did, I think. It sounded like a cat. Have you seen any strays around the neighbourhood?"
Deborah replied.
"I don't know. It sort of sounded like it came from inside the house."
He sounded on edge. I thought I'd been quiet enough, but it seemed the man had sharp ears.
"Well, if it happens again, we can check around. You should get going. It's already 8:30.
Yeah, he left without another word. Thomas tried to enter my room many times over the next few weeks. I'd feel his heartbeat through the door as he jammed knives between the door and the frame and tugged at the unrelenting handle. I wouldn't let him in. I wasn't ready, but I started taking steps to meet him, slowly at first. Deborah hid the taffy in the cupboard over the fridge, so every night I would take one from the hiding spot and slide it under his door. When he woke up every morning, he'd find my little surprise, and I could feel his soul grow brighter. By day, I would linger out of sight, sometimes appearing to cross hallways so that he would get a fleeting look at me before I disappeared out of sight once more. While he was initially recoiled with shock, I taught him that I was harmless through time. Sometimes, Thomas would lose his favourite toys or the coins he collected, and I would gather them and place them atop his bed. The confusion and apprehension turned to familiarity. In fact, he told his mother that a fairy followed him around the house and helped him. I finally worked up the nerve to get in close. While he slept, I would drift through his door and sit weightless at his bedside. I'd run a spectral hand over his forehead and whistle the few tunes that surfaced from the murky depths of my memory. It took time until he no longer froze when I appeared before him in fleeting glances or reflections. But Thomas started to wave back when I gave him my little greetings. After months of planning, I was ready to introduce myself. Thomas's life force had become addictive. I needed more, or the ravenous hunger that threatened to consume me would only grow stronger. The time came. It was hours past the whole house falling asleep, so I entered Thomas's room and whispered in his ear, "Wake up, Thomas." I rushed out of the room and down the stairs as he rubbed his groggy eyes and kicked off his blanket. I left a trail of candies for him, leading down the stairs and to the living room. His footsteps echoed down the hall, so I hummed a song to guide him toward me. At the trail's end, I sat on the carpet, loose garments fluttering even without a breeze. I hoped my dull eyes and bloodied body wouldn't scare him off. I'd done everything I could to warm him to my existence. All that was left was to see how he would react. Thomas rounded the corner and spotted me. I created little lights that orbited my head to entertain him. When he saw me, Thomas froze and dropped his handful of candies to the floor. "Hello, Thomas." I waved and beckoned him forward. It was so comforting to finally speak with him. The one-sided kinship I'd formed finally came to fruition. He took a tentative step forward. "Who are you?" he asked. His slight tremor stopped, and wonder filled his voice. "I don't know. I've been watching you for a long time. Will you sit with me? I've been so lonely," I told him. My voice had a slight warble I hadn't noticed. It was the first time I'd spoken so many words. He took another step. From that distance, it was like basking in the fireplace's glow. The next step felt more like I was standing before a bonfire. "You're such a beautiful boy. You remind me of someone, but who? Come closer, please," I begged. It was like I was a siren luring a sailor. The boy seemed to be in a trance. Thomas watched the lights dance around my head. He was nearly within arm's reach. "Are you a fairy?" He reached out to one of the lights closest to him, but it disappeared when he made contact. "Maybe I am. Would you like that, Thomas?" The yearning for his warmth turned into hunger. I thought I wanted to hold him, but some part of me begged to devour him instead. He was so close. "Are you okay, miss? You're crying." Thomas paused just before I could touch him. I couldn't feel any tears on my cheeks, and I was sure I had a broad smile. Why was I crying? "It's so cold, Thomas. Please let me hold you." I opened my arms to embrace him. Thomas thought for a moment. I could see the pity so clearly on his face. "It'll be okay, miss." Thomas knelt to me. His body made contact with my lap. An ecstasy shot through my body. I could touch him. I could feel his heat, his heartbeat. I wrapped him in a tight embrace. Tears clouded my vision I didn't know I could conjure. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." I could only chant my gratitude. Thomas returned the hug at first, but after the seconds passed, his grip slackened. I couldn't let go, even when he started groaning and whimpering. The flow of his life through me was too intoxicating. "Thank you," I whispered. That all-consuming chill had abated, if only for a moment. I remembered that warmth. In the time before I awoke to my new existence, there was another child that clung to my bosom. I knew it. Eventually, the warmth stopped flooding in, and the chill crept back through my body. "Thomas?" I unlocked my arms around his torso, and his body slammed to the floor, completely limp. "Thomas!" I shouted, trying to grab his arm, but my hand passed through his cold flesh. He looked shriveled, like I'd sucked his innards out, leaving only loose skin. "No, please," I muttered. Thomas's eyes had lost their color and their light. His lips were blue, and ice crystals formed in his mouth where saliva had been. I tried to grab him again, but I couldn't get a hold of his lifeless body. "No, no!" I screamed. The floor around me took on an icy sheen, and the moisture in the air solidified into snow. The pictures on the walls shook and eventually shattered, launching thousands of shards of glass into the drywall and Thomas, chipping chunks off his frozen flesh. I tilted my head back and wailed, shattering the windows in the living room. The temperature in the house dropped below 0. Footsteps thudded from the halls upstairs, and I heard the man sprint down full tilt. "Who's there?" he demanded, cocking some kind of gun. I couldn't stop my shrieks and sobbing. I clutched my head and knelt on the floor over Thomas. The pain from my old wounds ached like they were fresh, and I had never felt a deeper, more excruciating cold than the one that came over me. The man burst into the living room, aiming the shotgun straight ahead. He immediately noticed his son's corpse. "Thomas!" That time, the man could see me as more than a shimmer. I must have appeared partially through to him. He pointed the gun at me, shaking violently. "What are you? Did you do this?" he demanded. I sat in silence, finally past the tears. "Thomas, I'm sorry. Please." I looked up at the man. "I'm sorry." The man hovered his finger over the trigger, but threw his gun to the side to pick up his son. "Oh, Lord, Lord, please, not my boy." He wept with his son in his arms. I floated to my feet. I couldn't be around them any longer, especially when the man's warmth looked so delicious that it would soothe my heart's pain. "You!" The man tried to grab my leg as I passed, but I drifted out of reach and through the ceiling. I retreated to my room and hid in a corner. I curled into a ball and tried to fall back into a slumber, anything to take me away from whatever life I lived. Over the next few days, people bustled around the house. Several times, someone managed to break down my door and barged into my space, but I made myself invisible, never again coming into contact with the rest of the family. Gradually, I was able to force myself back to sleep. Once I was alone in the house, after everything had been removed and all warmth had vanished, I turned off my consciousness for as long as I could, until the next time life stepping through the door would awake me. I had a dream, or maybe I was recalling a memory. I lived in this house, but it looked very different. Everything was hazy, like I was looking at life through a foggy glass pane. There was a child I often held to my chest. I couldn't recall his face, but I could feel his smile and hear his laughter. Along with the child, a man lurked within those walls. A cold, still aura followed him, and the hair on my neck would stand on end as he approached. When he was near, it felt like he held a knife to my throat. As tense as it was enduring his presence, I think I was happy as long as the boy was near me. When I slept, I had no concept of time. Decades must have passed because when I regained consciousness, the house looked strange. Even though many people must have gone through and done the renovations, none of it woke me. I must have been more exhausted than I'd thought. The furniture followed trends I didn't understand, and some new machines and appliances that looked otherworldly scattered about. Memories of the last family haunted me, and the cold hunger tormented me still. New emotions bubbled within me, an inexplicable rage. I had nothing to direct it at, so it only festered and grew. None of my old memories had surfaced either. If anything, they felt even further away. One thing I knew was that what happened with Thomas would happen again. If only I could have slept forever. People flooded the house, a veritable buffet that I couldn't touch. They were meat dangled before a starving animal. If I couldn't have their warmth, I'd rather they disappear forever, but I couldn't bring myself before the crowd. After weeks, it seemed that a new couple had decided to buy the house. They came in one day with a moving crew and quickly made the home their own. I would watch them from a distance, forcing myself back with every ounce of my self-control. The woman was especially radiant. She smiled brightly, laughed lightly, and walked with a skip in her step. So much life, too much life, but I couldn't hurt anyone else. Before I acted on my desires and turned them into lifeless husks, I needed to drive them away to never return. The couple settled in quickly, and I overheard some of their conversations while lurking in the darkness. That house gained some notoriety. One person went missing, last seen in the house many years before, and only 20 years ago, a young boy died gruesomely. His parents called it the work of an evil spirit. I suppose they were correct, but the young pair lived undeterred, thanking God for the fortune of having such a beautiful home for an unreasonably low price. I kept my distance as best as possible, but their presence pulled me closer unwillingly. The rage I felt toward the thing I'd become threatened to boil over, and I couldn't hold myself back another day. By night, I would howl and wail, drawing on the pain that festered inside me for so long. My cries would echo through the empty halls every night. The couple searched the house but found nothing. They couldn't sleep. They called the police 3 times but were left to deal with it alone. I radiated cold energy, chilling the house to uninhabitable levels.
Roger, this is crazy. We have to get out of here. I don't know what the hell is going on, but we are not safe.
The woman broke one night after hours of my piercing sobs.
I don't know, Marie. It could be a cat or something, right? And the house is old. The insulation is probably worthless by now. I'll get someone to check it out again tomorrow.
Roger groaned and shuffled in the bed.
Are you stupid? There's something clearly wrong here. If it's not haunted, then someone is torturing us. You're really going to let this go on?
I listened in, praying that Roger would listen to reason and leave me be. But he ignored his wife and fell back to sleep. Marie threw off the covers and stormed out of the bedroom.
I'm getting a hotel room. I'm not spending another night here.
She slammed the door behind her, rushed down the stairs, grabbed her keys, and left through the front door. With the woman gone, I drifted down the halls to the master bedroom where Roger slept. He tossed and turned under his covers, shivering violently when I drew close. I forced myself away from him, from the warmth oozing off his body, and stood by the window, watching the full moon overhead. It was cracked, and the gentle breeze set the curtains aflutter, cascading around me and wrapping around my ethereal body. From behind me, Roger stirred.
Marie?
He called out to me, rubbing his eyes and pushing off the comforter. When he got a closer look at me, I felt his slight linger on my blood-stained nightgown, then my milky eyes. He screamed and jumped out of bed, grabbing something heavy off the nightstand.
Who the fuck are you?
He shouted, brandishing the blunt object at me. I fought myself to stay back.
Please leave,
I asked, my voice coming out in nothing more than a whisper.
You leave. This is my house. What the hell are you doing here? I can't take it much longer. You look so alive. I need to feel your beating hearts. Please, while I can still stop myself,
I begged. Roger gripped the object tighter and hucked it at me. It passed straight through my head and shattered the window behind me. I floated off my feet and dangled weightless in the air, allowing my hair to fall through the floor.
Why?
I could still see the moon. It let off its own chill, but unlike the cold in me, it was serene still.
Holy shit!
Roger ran out of the room, slamming the door behind him and attempting to barricade it with a chair he found in the hall. I was sure he'd leave. I basked in the moon's glow for the remainder of the night, but by the time morning came, I could still feel Roger's presence. Marie had returned as well. I waited for nightfall in my room while they shouted outside.
What do we do? Get the cops? A priest? Oh my God!
Roger shouted from the living room.
We need to get out of here, Roger. We're going to fucking die if we stay.
Marie yelled back.
One more night, Marie. We need this place. We have nowhere else to go. Whatever it is, I don't think it wants to hurt us.
The rage inside burned. Icy flames ravaged my fragile ego. Why couldn't they just leave me alone? Why did they make me hurt them? I drifted back to one of the mirrors I hadn't yet shattered and looked at my reflection. Rotten flesh sloughed off my body, and my eye sockets were empty, leaving caverns of darkness. The blood on my gown was as bright as ever, as though it was still fresh. The arms I could see didn't match those in the mirror. Only my reflection was so grotesque. It was the real me, whatever I'd become. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the couple hunkered down somewhere in the living room.
Why won't you leave? I begged you. Why?
My voice projected through the halls and all the way to the couple. I went through the floor and hid in the darkness of the living room, watching as they interlocked their trembling bodies. A small circle of salt surrounded them, and they clutched wooden crosses to their chests.
It's okay. She can't touch us,
Roger assured his wife next to him. I couldn't suppress a growl, being that close to them, as starving as I was. Marie yelped and gripped Roger tighter. Roger returned her hug.
Come out. I know you're here,
Roger shouted. I felt turmoil build up in me, and the room shook. The glass bulbs overhead trembled and then shattered, plunging the room into darkness, only illuminated by the soft moon glow. My ethereal body reflected the light, and the silk of my gown swayed as I walked toward them. I could see their breath as the temperature in the room plummeted. Their teeth chattered, and they shivered.
Stop! Stay back!
Roger held out his cross to no effect. I could no longer see them as people, only glowing balls of light I needed to melt to my frozen soul. I approached their salt circle, but when I drifted through it, an electric shock paralyzed my body, and I shrieked in pain. Roger picked up a handful of salt and threw it over me. Every grain seared my flesh, causing me to twist and rise in ways impossible for humans. Another barrage of salt hit me, melting my flesh until white bone poked through. The pain was worse than death. The rage inside grew into a blizzard.
No!
I cried out, and the pieces of glass littering the floor floated to me, revolving around my body in a blur. Before the couple could flinch, the fragments hit them like hail, lacerating every inch of their bodies. They hardly had the time to cry out in pain before the torrent of jagged shards slit their throats. I clutched my head and tried to stop it, but no amount of effort could keep the rage inside. Droplets of blood clung to the glass and flung around the room. The only noises from the couple were gurgling, and their only movements were to clutch at the long gashes on their necks.
Stop!
I shouted to myself. Their warmth was seeping away as the life gradually drained from their souls. The many shards clattered to the floor, and I rushed over to their sides. It was immediately clear there was no saving them. Their skin was flayed and their faces mincemeat. They still held each other as their bodies gave out the final twitches. I reached out to touch Roger's forehead.
It's too late. I'm sorry,
I said. Some of Roger's warmth flowed into me when I made contact. I couldn't let it go to waste, so I knelt down to the couch and wrapped my arms around the couple, pulling out their final breaths and devouring their dwindling lives. Like the boy, their flesh froze and shriveled until I held two husks. The feeling was back, like I was close to paradise. Their warmth made me feel whole again. Their fires burned on inside me, but only briefly before being extinguished. Whatever I had become wasn't able to hold life for long. I could crave it, consume it, but I would quickly end up starved again. I floated a blanket to Roger and Marie and draped it over their mangled corpses, to be discovered by whatever unfortunate soul next stepped foot in the house.
Rest well. Something beautiful waits for you.
They would have the privilege of joining paradise. I envied them. After my meal, I felt tired again and even emptier than before. Every time I consumed warmth, the cold returned stronger. I went to my room to leave the waking world once again. Another dream came to me. That stern, vicious man would find me while I sang to the child and ripped it away from me. When I tried to take the child back, he would strike me down and lock me in some dark place. Only the memory of the child's warmth kept me from losing my mind when I was locked away. Faces came back to me. The child was a boy, no more than 8. The man was tall with short, thick hair and a scruffy face. Fear of the man, hatred for him, resentment, love for the child, compassion, desire, all swam in the recesses of my addled mind. Then I awoke. The house was desolate. Years must have passed since I last walked the halls. Shutters bordered every window. A mold crept up the walls. I left the room. The walls were devoid of paintings, and it was colder than ever before. A perfect stillness and silence settled over everything. Layers of dust covered the banisters. It felt as far away from paradise as anything could. After those many long years, I wanted nothing more than to be free of this place. Let time bring the walls and termites consume the studs. Let me leave behind my cold, suffocating existence. I could see echoes of my past more clearly. I would watch myself scream at the man and bang on doors. The man would drag me into the room that became my home. The child would hide behind corners, watching our fights. He would hide from the man, but he would also hide from me. Sometimes he shuddered and flinched when I tried to lift him to me. Signs of life emanated from the door, the first in decades. I floated before the door and waited, no longer bothering to conceal myself. There was a metallic rattling as a person outside broke the chain that bound the door shut. They pushed it open, revealing their form and the night sky. The man stepped inside and looked up at me like he expected me. Something lurched inside me when I saw his face. He was so similar to the man from my past, from the shape of his face to his towering height.
"Are you Betty?"
he asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind himself. I couldn't muster up words for half a minute.
Who are you?"
I asked. In my emotional state, some floorboards around us cracked, causing the man to jump a bit.
"I'm Dale. Grandpa told me about you."
He watched me with sorrow, even guilt, but I had no idea why.
"I'm Betty."
I floated closer, inspecting his face.
"Yes, you are. Grandpa told me to tell you he was sorry." "Why?"
I asked. I tried to maintain the conversation, but the hunger gnawed at me. It never left.
"Please leave. I'm so hungry. I don't want to take you to..." "Don't worry. Just follow me."
Dale walked past me and to the cellar, climbing down with me in tow. I watched in silence as the man walked to the far wall in the basement, took a hammer from a belt on his waist, and smashed through the bricks, revealing a wooden crate. I could feel something calling to me from the crate, like a bit of myself begging for release inside.
"What is that?"
I hovered around, spinning circles around the box. Dale took a crowbar and pried it open, revealing dry bones and rotting flesh draped in a nightgown just like mine. He gagged and stepped away while I stayed glued to the sight. The skeleton seemed to pull me in. I could feel a spiritual chain binding me to it.
"How?"
I touched the bones. Dale sniffled away from me, unable to look at the bones.
"It was true."
Dale bent over and covered his eyes.
"I'm sorry, Grandma. Grandpa didn't mean it. He said you were hysterical. He said you'd hurt Dad. Then you fought and he went too far. I'm so sorry. After all these years, he only told me right before he died."
I saw so much of the boy I loved so much in Dale. I wanted to embrace him, dry his tears, and show him love, but I knew I had to hold myself back.
It's okay. I still love you. I'll always love you."
I consoled him from a distance. When Dale gathered himself, he pulled lighter fluid and a match from his backpack.
Grandma, do you want to move on?
He asked. He must have meant paradise, that euphoric, perfect place I could only brush for an instant. I would have to leave him behind. I didn't want to, but the hunger was growing. In mere minutes, I would have to make his warmth mine.
Yes,
I assured him. Dale nodded and sprayed the bones with the fluid until they were thoroughly doused. He struck the match and looked at me. I smiled back, the first genuine smile in decades. He wiped away tears and tossed the match into the fluid, igniting the bones in a magnificent bloom of flame. In an instant, everything was hot. The ice in my spirit melted, and the weight lifted off me.
Thank you, my dear boy. Thank you.
I spoke to the boy for the final time as I drifted upwards toward an even warmer place.
Rest well, Grandma,
the boy told me, as the bones smoldered below his feet. That chain that had wrapped around my soul so long ago uncoiled, and I drifted off untethered. The chill that tortured me for so long thawed. I approached that place, paradise. The higher I floated, the hotter it burned, but it never hurt. I was so close. My soul sang in joy, and euphoria that was stronger than a hit of opium consumed me. And, that time, nothing dragged me down. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to click subscribe and check out some more stories here.